Welcome to the Starter Girlz Podcast, the show dedicated to the Starter Girl. She's an achiever, she's a creator, she's a magic maker, she's a dreamer, and she is doing all the things. I'm your host, Jennifer Loading, and welcome to this episode. Welcome to another episode of the Starter Girlz Podcast. I'm so excited about my guest today, Tiana Sanchez. She is awesome. She's the CEO and founder of TSI LLC, a #1 best-selling author. She's an executive coach, corporate trainer, keynote speaker, and the host of a podcast called Like a Real Boss. I'm super excited about this. Tiana got her career start at 16 with the 90% female-led national franchise organization, Hot Dog on a Stick, which I know what that is. She became a manager at 17, was promoted to regional manager, and welcomed the company as her first consulting client. So Tiana, welcome to the show. I am so thrilled to have you here today.
Well, thank you for having me, Jennifer. I appreciate it. This is an awesome introduction. It's always a reminder like, oh my gosh, you've come through a lot.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny when we go back through these bios, like I'm always looking for these amazing guests. And I love these stories like that because I just know who these people are when they just, they start and they go and they pave the way. And so when I read your story, your bio and everything, I was like, okay, this girl is like making things happen. I love it. Love it. So what I want to start off with, because I know these guys, these fabulous women that are listening to this are going to be, what is she doing? So tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what you're, I guess, creating out there.
Well, my business, the business side of what I'm doing is all about working with organizations, one person at a time. I know there's a lot of companies that have problems. They have challenges. Whenever you have people, you're going to have problems. And so to help the retention, to reduce turnover, to make sure that employees are being fitted and matched into the right roles, we come alongside the companies, particularly the HR directors and leaders and the C-suites, to help them with real tangible ways to improve the work environment and their employee experiences. So we do that through a couple of ways, as you described, through coaching, assessments, training, development, all of that yummy goodness. And that's what we do. And I love to write books. I've written a couple of books, and I've also, have the podcast, as you described. And so those are the things that we enjoy doing, working with the companies and helping to see some real change out there with people.
Yeah, I'm curious to know, because obviously at a very young age, you were driven. There's no doubt about that. I can just tell. I'm curious to know what led to this. Was this like, did you know from a young age that you were going to just be a female, leader, entrepreneur, do this? Or did this just sort of, you took this as a young female and then sort of just morphed into this?
Definitely wasn't something that I knew. I had no example, no template of anyone who had owned a business that I recalled. Later on in life, I would realize that it was my grandmother who was very influential, but I didn't know it at the time. Sometimes things come out a little later. Seeds are planted, but they don't, blossom until later on. But early on, no, I grew up in a family. We were not wealthy. We were not middle class. I was a middle child of 3. We had to struggle and get everything that we needed. My parents divorced when I was 12 years old. I ended up paying for my first car, paid for my prom, and got a job at 16 because I knew I wouldn't, have the means any other way to get the things that I wanted. So I think that drive early on came from a place of scarcity, came from a place of I didn't have, and if I want, I got to go get. And how do I go get? Get a job, hustle, and do what you have to do. And so when I started working in the mall, because that's what you did back in the 90s, right. Dating myself, you worked in the mall. I started actually at a shoe company first, and then I went across the way to the food court, and it was Hot Dog on a Stick. And I started working there at 17 years old. And part of that drive and passion, Jennifer, that you described stemmed from that experience. I owe a lot of my career where it is today to Hot Dog on a Stick, because at that time, the company was 95% women owned, women led. Every employee there looked like me, gender wise. We were very diverse before diversity was, sure, something that we talk about now. And I was able to see something that I knew I could be, see it. If you see it, you can be it. And that was really, helpful for me. And I think that and drive and that ambition helped to propel me forward. So I owe it a lot to that lovely little lemonade and Hot Dog on a Stick uniform. And I'm so glad you know what it is, Jennifer, because a lot of people don't know. I have to explain what it is.
Yeah. Well, I think you and I probably grew up around the same time, and I worked in the mall too. So I know all this. It's like, I think about like my first jobs, like back when Montgomery Ward's was still in business. I had a job there. I worked at the Children's Place at one point, and I remember working in the mall. Yeah. Okay. So, I remember going to the food court during my breaks in those times and the restaurants that were in there. And it's so funny because here it's like, like several of these malls, like the one I used to work at, I don't even know if it's really even a mall anymore. And it's like, do people even go into those places much anymore? It's like so different now. So I get it. And I do remember hot dog on a stick. Yes. So awesome.
If you didn't see us, you could definitely smell us because you got the hot dogs and the lemonade.
You're so right. I love it, Tiana. So this is great. So I want to talk, I guess, a little bit about this. You were talking about, I'm really interested in this great recalibration. I'm interested to know what this is about because we just talked a little bit offline. And so I want you to fill us in on that because I think that might be a great starting point for us right here with, to get this going.
We're in a midst of change. We're always in constant change. We like to think that this crisis or a crisis such as, the pandemic, and I feel like I'm so tired of hearing about it and not to be disrespectful, but I know that there are other crises out there. That's a health crisis, but we have social crises. We have natural disasters. We have political crises. There's so many other crises out there and they're not going to go away. And we have to understand how to not only navigate, but recalibrate through these different times, these changing times. And so we hear about the Great Depression, the Great Resignation, all of these things. And so I like to consider where we are right now is in a time of recalibration. So, I've coined this phrase, the Great Recalibration, which is a point in time where we not even pivot, because to me, a pivot seems like you just shift, like you right turn, left turn is just a one-step process. But a calibration is a constant. It is, and I don't know if you're of this age, Jennifer, but it's like, okay, I'm starting to get these hot flashes now. I'm starting to get a little warm. And it's like in the house, I might need to turn up the air conditioner. I have to recalibrate. But maybe later on that night, I might be cold and I need extra blankets. So then I have to recalibrate. It's in this constant flux of calibration until you find the kind of right setting that you need. And it's not this state of permanency forever, but it's just adjusting to the situation and the severity of the crises that we're in. And so this kind of recalibration can be applied to different areas of our life. It can be applied to, again, change. It could be applied to, again, during or after a crisis that we experience. And I believe, Jennifer, there's different types of crises. We have personal crises, which I look at as a lowercase c sometimes. And then we have capital C crises, which are the more severe disturbances that we experience in our life. And so you have to be able to recalibrate. And I think the best example that I can give is, I love making espresso machines, and I bought an espresso machine for a girls' trip. I was so excited I was going to make some espresso. And then my darn espresso machine was not working, and I thought I had it set on the right settings. I was excited. I tried it, didn't work. Like 5 times later, didn't work. I get back home and I pull out the instruction manual, and then I'm reading how to readjust the settings. And so I'm kind of figuring out, I pull a shot. It's better, but it's not quite. So I adjust it again. And so now I'm adjusting to get the perfect, if you're an espresso person like me, the colors have to be nice and caramelly at the top, and you have these 3 layers, and it's so good to get that right, the product or what that is at the end. And so this calibration, I think, is where I'd like to see all of us begin to do on a constant basis.
Yeah, this is good. I like that you were talking about the thermostat earlier, because I think right before I came in this room, I had to turn the thermostat down because I was hot. It's not a constant in my house. It's up, down, like, now I'm hot, I'm sweating, put it down. Now I'm cold. Let's put it back up again. Great analogy there. But no, I agree with you on this whole, calibration, because I do think, I think going through the, when you have to do things, go through adversity, or when you start doing things very, very young, I think you learn these skills. And I think the more you put yourself out there, you learn how to recalibrate, right? Like you get better at taking in problems and saying, what do I need to do to navigate around them, rather than saying, okay, I can't figure this out. So I think you become more industrious the more you do this. But I do think it takes a being aware that you have to do this. And I don't know if you agree about this as an entrepreneur. I feel this way, is that, when you come into we'll not talk about like social stuff right now. Let's just talk about entrepreneur space. But I think when we come into business, we just sort of have to have this mindset that we know we're going to probably have to do this a lot. Like you're going to have to go through and recalibrate many times in your career because there's going to be fires burning all the time in different areas of your life, right?
Yes, definitely. It's something, especially for entrepreneurs. I mean, you know, the studies don't lie. The first few years of an entrepreneur or startup, you know, most fail. They struggle. They can't raise the capital. They struggle with their, the product market, identifying who their audience is. And then if whatever the industry they're in changes or disappears, is null and void, no longer. We talked about the mall earlier. Think about all the stores that we grew up on that were in the mall. And then when everybody started to leave the mall and go online, those companies folded. And, that happens. And so if I'm in business and I'm not in an industry that's evolving or innovating, I could be left behind. So it's in a constant state of innovation, and you're in a constant state of change, and asking yourself this question: is what I'm doing going to be valuable to others? Is it going to outpace my competitors? Is what I'm doing going to be an evergreen product that's going to, last and go on and on and on, even after me? So I do think entrepreneurs, also employees, I know that, if you do work for yourself, you're your own boss. If you're work at a company, you work for someone else. There's change in companies. Right. I read recently that Dropbox CEO had to lay off 16% of their workforce. That's 500 employees.
Wow.
500 employees that they had to lay off, and they attributed it to AI. Think about you as an entrepreneur, as a business person, the implications of artificial intelligence now, or the metaverse, or just the future of everything that we're doing, having these layoffs, this turnover, and how it's going to affect you. And even as an entrepreneur, how do I innovate my product so that it's, meeting the needs of, our clients, or, staying with the competition that's adding in these new features. We have Chat GPT and all of these things now, which is kind of cool, actually. I will admit, I use it a couple of times myself.
Me too.
So it is a constant state of change, and but for employers or employees as well, I think not being in business for yourself, not having that drive or ambition, you're left feeling a level of uncertainty and where to go and what to do, because that's 500 new resumes. That's 500 new people that are looking for jobs. That's 500 new people that are questioning their potential and where they're going to go. And that's not a good place to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. This whole thing with, and I use Chat GPT. It's funny because I just, recently found, as of like just this week, I found that, when I do my podcast, and I don't know if you use it, because I love that for the podcast, but I found these sites that actually, I don't know why I didn't know this, Tiana, that you can upload the audio and they do all the show notes. They create all of it for you. I'm like, where have I been? Where have I been? I am like, so I'm one of those that, I'm kind of liking the AI and the Chat GPT for certain things, but I get it. It's a very interesting time, talking to that point about how jobs are going with this now. And is your product going to be relevant moving forward? And how do you keep it, recalibrate as you go forward?
Yes. So. It's something that we constantly have to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm interested. I want to kind of shift this just a little bit. We're not going to keep you too long, but I know this could be like a going on forever conversation, but because you are a female owned business, and I'm just like, the power to you, girl. Like, I love it when I hear that women are rocking things out. It's like, this is what it's all about. I would love to know, like, what maybe you have learned in your journey yourself, through this.
As a female entrepreneur?
Yeah. What you've learned what have you learned about yourself and in this journey?
Well, I'll say it this way. I feel like the person that I was 12 years ago when I started the business, I do believe that I've evolved and changed. It's like being in a marriage, right? You've married somebody, but then you look up 10 years later, 15 years later, are you really the same people that you were at the beginning? Because through that relationship, you've overcome some things. You've overcome some obstacles. You've had some children. You may have had some grandchildren at that point. It's very similar in the sense that I've gone through this period, this journey of starting a business, started a relationship with my business, right? Because I am a separate entity. I'm separate from my business in that sense. I keep it that way. And I've birthed some children, right? Some new products, some new services, and some have gone over well, like our kids, and some are a little stubborn.
Yeah.
They haven't quite taken. And then you overcome some of the challenges. So I think if anything, one of the things I feel, Jennifer, that I've learned is being flexible. That was actually one of my words a few years ago. You know how every start of the new year, you come up with a new word. I remember getting a little bracelet and it had the word flexible on it. And that was my word. I said, I need to be more flexible. I've learned, number 2, how to expand my capacity, or knowing when to expand my capacity. So as an entrepreneur, sometimes you get to a point where you say, I can't take on anymore. Like I can handle, this is enough that I can handle, or at least that's what you think, because maybe you experience some growth and you feel like, oh my gosh, we're growing, we're outpacing the goals that we had, or we're growing too much. And I don't know that I can handle the work that's coming or what I'm doing. And so I remember shifting my language. Instead of saying, okay, I've got enough, or this is only the number that I want is 10 clients or 20, is I would start saying, okay, expand my capacity. I want, and that meant expanding could mean get partners, gain new consultants, get automated systems to help me do the things that I don't necessarily need to do. So not only did I learn to be more flexible, but I learned to shift to say, when I feel like I've gotten too much, that's the scarcity mindset in me from a kid, like I was sharing with you, that it's like, no, expand my capacity because there's so much more that I could be doing. It's about other people, which leads me to point number 3, which is you don't do or get anywhere by yourself. And so any person that has attained any level of success, whether it's athletes, actors, superstars, entrepreneurs, authors, whoever, you do not get there by yourself. There is the person who referred you to the company that booked you for a speaking engagement. There's the LinkedIn message that you got from someone that, again, recommended you to a friend or whomever, or someone who said, hey, I'm inviting you to do a showcase of your product or service to my client base. No one gets anywhere by themselves. And so I know I've learned that, and that brings humility. When you think you've arrived and you want to pat yourself on the back and you want to like, ooh, I got it going on. It's like, I have to be humble and say, I may have achieved a certain level of success, but I didn't get there by myself. And so those are 3 things that I think that I can think of off the top of my head that I've learned going through this process and being a journey and looking forward to the future and being okay to entertain other ideas.
Yeah, no, I love this. I was writing it down. I was noting this. I think all of these are really good, and it is important. I like that you talked about the flexibility, and on that aspect, just because you are a mom, and I didn't know that you had kids, and that is one question, it comes up a lot, is how do these moms do, they're moms and they're doing great over here, and then they have these successful businesses, like navigating that journey, right? So I think the flexibility is huge because you've got to be open to all the things that are coming in at you at the different angles, So I think that's great. And I like the changing your mind, the mindset, going from the scarcity mindset to this abundant mindset, just changing that languaging, because we know words are powerful, right? So good stuff. Yeah. All of it. And I think the other thing I picked up on is the delegation. I was hearing some of that in there too, having the team. And then that's when you can start delegating. And I always talk about with that, the beauty in that is when you can recognize the areas that you're not necessarily as gifted in, because we all have areas that we're strengthened. And I always say, like, I'm the forward facing, like I'm good at sales. I'm good at closing people. I'm good at relational building. When it comes to like technology and all the, the stuff in the back, budgets, I don't want to do any of that, Tiana. Just somebody else take it,
Right. I'm here with you on that one.
Yeah. And I think that's where a team, but you're right. In everything we do, we don't get where we're going by ourselves. You have to have people that lead you. And I think that's where good relational building comes into place too, because the more people you're building relationships with, the wider your network gets and the more availability and opportunities get presented before you, right?
Oh, absolutely. I had an experience just recently because you never know who's watching you. You never know who's reading your stuff, listening to your podcast, because not everybody comments. Right. And I remember years ago, it had to be over 10 years ago, a woman, I sent a newsletter or something, and she commented on it, and I'd never heard from her before. She made a note saying something like, "I'm reading your stuff, like, please continue," or something to that effect. And it really just kind of surprised me, like, okay, like, but you've never commented before, like, you've never said anything. And she's like, I'm watching, like, I'm reading, I'm listening. And that just shifted how I think about things. And recently I was invited to participate in an event that I had participated in years ago, and then thereafter I had applied to be a part of the event that got turned down. Year after year, I would apply and got turned down. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to stop, because clearly what I'm putting forth is not something they want to hear. And then recently I was reached out to by the same planners saying, hey, we would love for you to come. Now, I didn't do anything at that point because I had kind of given up on the opportunity, but it was because of referrals. Someone had said, hey, you know who you should reach out to is this person. And it happened a couple of times. And I said, well, how did you, get a hold of me? She said, oh, so-and-so referred you. And this person referred you. And it was the network. It was the relationship building. It was the things that they had seen over the years that was very consistent, but no one had said it to me. I didn't know that I had built this reputation in this particular community that was well received, but unbeknownst to me, they had, and to the point where it was, recommended that I contribute and participate. And the event went great. It was fantastic, but it was the relationships and it was the network. And I do feel like that saying is still true, that your network can attribute or determine your net worth in many cases. And I really think that's still a very true, powerful statement today.
I agree with you on that. It's a good story. I agree with you on that. So tell us a little bit about your podcast. I want to talk about this really quick. Tell us what's happening on this thing. I'm going to follow you, by the way. I've got to check all this out. So it's funny that you're like, I always have to meet you guys, because it's like, once I get you on here and then I see all your passion, how excited you are, then it's like, okay, now I got to like really dive in and get into all of this. I'm going to definitely check out your podcast, but I want you to tell us about it, what you're doing on that.
So speaking of calibration, we are in the midst of a recalibration for the podcast, kind of re-envisioning what it's going to look like going forward. So we've been on a little bit of a hiatus for the last probably 13, 12 months or so. But the podcast is called Like a Real Boss, and it is designed for modern day leaders. So anyone in a supervisory management leadership position, you could be a CEO, you could be a team lead in any capacity, or maybe a teacher, a professor. And so what we want to do is we want to give insights and information and spark provocative conversations around what it means to lead. And so we have over 100 episodes that we've archived now. We've interviewed futurists. We've interviewed athletes. I actually love all my athletes. I've interviewed a couple of people a few times. Yes, because they've done so great on the show. That we just love having them on. I've interviewed, I want to say, an actor. I've interviewed like a survivor of, mental health or domestic violence, just different people in their roles that speak to that. So it is very much, and a lot of women, like usually every Women's History Month, which is March, we will feature a lot of women in their roles of leadership. And so it's a really good, I think, environment or a podcast to have. And so you can check it out. You can listen to it. A lot of the previous episodes, there's some really great stuff on there. So again, we are in this calibration mode, but more to come and more to share with you, hopefully in the future, in the near future.
Yeah, that's exciting, Tiana. It's funny that you say that too, because that's kind of what I did with Starter Girlz. Like I launched Starter Girlz in October of 2019, right before the pandemic. We don't want to say that word, but right before the pandemic. And at that time, it was supposed to be, my friend and I, we both came from the Mary Kay world. I was in that company for 22 years. I was in the top 2% of the company. So we both had come from that company, and we created Starter Girlz to be a platform for like women empowerment, people like yourself to come in. And then what happened is that I talked to a lot of athletes and men that are in like that kind of arena. And so it took this little shift, and we've had everybody from like actors on there. I've had, American Idol. I've had athletes. I've had I've had a couple of world record, different kinds of people. Well, then I ended up rebranding, and that's when we came out with the new show. And then this past December, I decided to revive the Starter Girlz and bring it back to its original roots, which is about the female entrepreneur like yourself, creator, all of that. And so now I've got both shows running, but I had archived that show for about 12 months. And it was funny because there were downloads still going on with that show. And so I thought, you know what? Let's just bring it back. We're going to recalibrate it, bring it back, original thing, and just go back to the roots of it. So it sounds like, yeah, it sounds like you're doing a little bit of what I'm doing, and I'm excited to check out some of your episodes. It sounds like we both have some really amazing, like to your point, the athletes I just love getting into their headspace. I have one I just reached out to. Oddly enough, I reached out to him because he was ex-military and he does mindset. But then I found out he's an ultra runner like my husband. My husband's done like 2,400 mile races, and this guy's done some of the same stuff. And so I'm like, oh, we're going to have a lot to talk about.
That sounds fun. No, that's good.
Yeah. So it's a lot of fun. So, all right. Well, Tiana, this has been amazing. I just wanted to ask you, I guess, one last question. You said so many great things today. I wrote down notes of what you were talking about and your 3 points and then your recalibration. I love it. Any like last minute words you want to like say, maybe some advice to some of our females that are out there? Maybe they're in this space where they're getting ready to just like on that tip of the iceberg, making that jump to do something.
One of the things I say at the end of my podcast episode is I always end with this quote, and I'll share it if you'll permit me to do it here, which is everyone wants to succeed, but not everyone is willing to do the work. And along with that quote reminds me of something someone said years ago is when we see other people and what they have, we often want that. But the quote goes, if you want what others have, you have to be willing to do what others did to get what others have gotten. So you have to be willing to do the work. If you want to achieve anything that you desire, dream, or aspire to do, you have to be willing to put in the work. And no one said it's going to be easy. No one said it was going to happen fast. But if you do it and you're diligent, it will come to pass.
Bam, mic drop. You gave me chills. I always laugh at my podcast. My people make fun of me because I always have that moment in the show where something gets said and I go, there it is. That was the moment I needed to hear because I got the chills. This is so good, Tiana. Okay, so if our audience wants to get in touch with you, maybe they want to pick up your books, check out your podcast, find out about your work, where do you want us to send them?
Okay, so super hard, but pay attention. It's TianaSanchez.com. My name. Super easy. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can do that same way. Tiana Sanchez.
I love it. Yours is easy. Mine's hard because it's my last name and it's German, so it's not easy. But yours is definitely easy. We'll make sure when this gets out, I'll get the links or the link in there and get you connected in there so they know where to find you and all that good stuff. This has been so much fun. I know I could keep you here forever. You're fun. So I love it. Thank you so much for, thank you for being authentic and sharing and, all the nuggets that you dropped in there. This was great.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for your audience and what you're doing. Congratulations to you too. And I'm glad you brought it back, your show, to its original roots. So much success to you.
Thank you, Tiana. All right. To our audience, of course, we do want to say to you, go check out, us on Apple, give us a rating there, hit that subscribe button on YouTube. And as I always say, be safe, take care of yourself and be kind to one another. We'll see you next time.